You think you need people on your side to win. You've been taught that success is a team sport, that networking is power, that alliances are everything. But what if I told you that the most dangerous position you can occupy is the one where you believe you need anyone at all? Machiavelli knew something that most people die without learning. He understood that the moment you depend on support, you've already surrendered your throat to the blade. The world doesn't reward those who wait for permission. It rewards those who take what they want while everyone else is still asking for help. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine you're standing in a room full of mirrors. Every reflection shows you a different version of yourself, each one slightly distorted, each one telling you what you should become. Your family wants you stable. Your friends want you relatable. Society wants you compliant. And here you are, trying to satisfy all these reflections while your true self suffocates in the center, unheard, unseen, unlived. This is what support really means. It's not strength. It's a cage dressed up as community. When Machiavelli wrote The Prince in 1513, exiled and stripped of everything, he wasn't writing a manual for tyrants. He was writing a survival guide for anyone who dared to stand alone in a world designed to break them. The first truth Machiavelli understood is this: people only support you when it serves them, not because they love you, not because they believe in your vision. They align with you because there's something in it for them. And the second that equation changes, they vanish like smoke. Look at your own life. Think about the people who cheered for you when you played it safe, when you chose the conventional path, when you made yourself small enough to fit their expectations. And where were they when you wanted to do something different? When you wanted to build something that scared you? They went quiet. They became skeptical. They started using words like realistic and practical because your ambition made them uncomfortable. It held up a mirror to their own limitations, and they hated you for it. This is the paradox of human nature. We say we want people to succeed, but only up to a certain point, only as long as their success doesn't make us feel inadequate. Machiavelli called this envy, and he identified it as one of the most destructive forces in human civilization. Envy doesn't announce itself. It wears the mask of concern. It speaks in the language of protection. I'm just worried about you, they say. I don't want you to get hurt. But what they really mean is, I don't want you to succeed where I failed. I don't want you to prove that the excuses I made for myself were just that, excuses. So what do you do when you realize that the support you've been seeking is actually the leash that's holding you back? You cut it. You internalize a truth that will feel brutal at first, but will eventually set you free. You are alone. You have always been alone. And that's not a curse. It's your greatest advantage. Because the person who needs nothing from others cannot be controlled by anyone. Machiavelli understood this when he wrote, "It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both." People misread this as cruelty. It's not. It's clarity. It's recognizing that emotional dependency is a liability in a world where everyone is playing their own game. Think about the architecture of power throughout history. The leaders who changed the world who built empires, who shifted the trajectory of human civilization, they didn't do it by consensus. Julius Caesar didn't poll the Senate before crossing the Rubicon. Steve Jobs didn't ask for permission before revolutionizing technology. Elon Musk didn't wait for support before attempting what everyone called impossible. They moved forward despite opposition, despite mockery, despite the absence of allies, because they understood something fundamental: momentum comes from within, not from without. But here's where most people fail. They confuse isolation with independence. They think that succeeding without support means becoming a hermit, cutting everyone off, operating in complete solitude. That's not what Machiavelli taught. He taught strategic detachment. There's a difference. Strategic detachment means you engage with people, you build relationships, you create networks, but you never, ever make your success dependent on their approval or assistance. You use the world. You don't let the world use you. Every interaction is a transaction. Every alliance is temporary. Every relationship serves a purpose, or it doesn't exist. This sounds cold, because you've been conditioned to believe that human connection should be warm, fuzzy, unconditional. But Machiavelli lived in Renaissance Italy, a place where families poisoned each other at dinner tables, where friends became assassins, where today's ally was tomorrow's executioner. He learned that sentimentality is a luxury that the powerful cannot afford. And if you want to succeed without support, you need to adopt the same ruthless pragmatism. Not because you're a bad person, but because the world will eat you alive if you don't. Let me tell you about a concept Machiavelli called vert. It's not virtue in the moral sense. It's not about being good. It's about being effective. It's about having the strength, the cunning, the adaptability to impose your will on reality, regardless of circumstances. Vert is what separates the person who complains about their situation from the person who changes it. It's the quality that allows you to look at a world that offers you nothing and build everything anyway. When you have vert, support becomes irrelevant because you've become self-sufficient at the deepest level. You don't need their money because you'll create your own. You don't need their connections because you'll build your own network. You don't need their validation because you've learned to validate yourself. But there is a deeper, more dangerous truth we haven't touched yet. The absence of support isn't just a challenge to overcome. It's a test. It's the universe asking you a question: how badly do you actually want this? Most people fail this test immediately. The moment they realize they're alone, they quit. They retreat. They convince themselves that if nobody believes in them, maybe they shouldn't believe in themselves either. This is the great filter. This is what separates the ones who make history from the ones who become a footnote in someone else's story. Machiavelli spent 14 years in exile after being accused of conspiracy. 14 years, no power, no position, no support, just a man in the countryside, writing letters that would shape political theory for the next 500 years. He could have given up. He could have accepted his defeat. Instead, he did something that only the truly independent can do. He used his isolation as fuel. He transformed his bitterness into brilliance. He wrote not for the approval of his contemporaries, but for the judgment of history. And history vindicated him. This is what you need to understand about operating without support. It forces you to develop capacities that supported people never cultivate. When you have a safety net, you never learn to fly. When you have people to fall back on, you never develop true resilience. When you have cheerleaders validating every step, you never build genuine self-trust. The absence of support is painful, yes, but it's also purifying. It burns away everything that isn't essential. It strips you down to your core and forces you to ask, what am I really made of? Now, let's talk about the practical mechanics of this. How do you actually succeed when nobody's helping you? First, you need to rewire your relationship with failure. Most people avoid failure because they're afraid of judgment. They're afraid of what others will think. But when you have no support, you have nothing to lose. Nobody's watching. Nobody cares. And that's liberating. You can fail 1,000 times, and the only person who needs to know is you. This is how you innovate. This is how you experiment. This is how you discover what works without the paralyzing fear of public humiliation. Second, you cultivate what Machiavelli called the fox and the lion. The lion represents force, directness, raw power. The fox represents cunning, adaptability, strategic thinking. Most people are neither. They're sheep, following the herd, doing what they're told, hoping someone will notice them and lift them up. But when you're alone, you can't afford to be a sheep. You need to be both fox and lion. You need to know when to fight and when to maneuver, when to be aggressive and when to be invisible, when to confront and when to circumvent. Third, you master the art of self-reliance at every level. Financial self-reliance means you control your own income streams. Emotional self-reliance means your mood isn't dependent on external validation. Intellectual self-reliance means you think for yourself instead of parroting what others believe. Physical self-reliance means you take care of your body so it can sustain the war you're waging. Every form of dependency is a weakness. Every weakness is an opening for someone else to control you. Close those openings. Become impenetrable. Here's something they don't teach you in school. The education system is designed to create dependence. It teaches you to raise your hand before speaking, to ask permission before acting, to seek approval from authority figures, to believe that someone else holds the keys to your future. This conditioning runs so deep that most people never question it. They graduate and immediately start looking for someone to work for, someone to validate them, someone to tell them what to do. They trade one form of dependency for another and call it success. But Machiavelli would look at this and laugh. He'd see it for what it is: voluntary slavery. Because the moment you make someone else the gatekeeper of your dreams, you've given them the power to destroy you, and they will. Maybe not intentionally, maybe not maliciously, but they will, because their interests will eventually diverge from yours. And when that happens, you'll be the one who suffers. So what's the alternative? You become the gatekeeper. You create the opportunities instead of waiting for them. You build the platform instead of begging for access to someone else's. You write the rules instead of playing by rules that were designed to keep you in your place. This is what it means to succeed without support. It means rejecting the entire framework that says you need permission to become who you're meant to be. Now I know what you're thinking. This sounds exhausting. This sounds lonely. This sounds like a recipe for burnout and isolation. And you're right. It is all of those things, at least at first. But here's what nobody tells you about the path of independence. It gets easier. The more you do it, the stronger you become. The first time you fail alone, it crushes you. The 10th time, you barely notice. The 100th time, you're grateful because each failure is data, each setback is education, each rejection is proof that you're attempting something worth doing. Machiavelli wrote that fortune is the arbiter of half the things we do, leaving the other half or so to be controlled by ourselves. Half, that's it. Half of your life is determined by circumstances beyond your control, where you were born, who your parents are, the opportunities you were given or denied. But the other half, that's yours. That's where you exercise your will. That's where you demonstrate whether you're a victim or a force of nature. Most people focus on the half they can't control and use it as an excuse. They blame their circumstances. They blame their lack of support. They blame the unfairness of the world. And maybe they're right. Maybe the world is unfair. But Machiavelli would ask, so what? What are you going to do about it? The people who change their lives are the ones who stop arguing with reality and start working with it. They accept that they're starting from zero. They accept that nobody's coming to save them. They accept that the world owes them nothing, and then they get to work. Not with resentment, not with bitterness, with cold, calculated determination. Because they understand that complaining is a waste of energy that could be spent building. Let me give you a framework. When you're operating without support, you need 3 things: clarity, courage, and consistency. Clarity means you know exactly what you want and why you want it. Not what your parents want, not what society expects, what you want. This is harder than it sounds because most people have never asked themselves this question honestly. They've spent their whole lives trying to please others that they don't even know who they are anymore. But you can't succeed at someone else's dream. You can only succeed at your own. So get clear. Brutally, uncomfortably clear. Courage means you act despite fear, despite doubt, despite the voice in your head that says you're not ready. You will never be ready. Readiness is a myth perpetuated by people who want to keep you waiting. Machiavelli said, "Where the willingness is great, the difficulties cannot be great." It's not about the absence of obstacles. It's about the presence of will. Do you want this badly enough to suffer for it? Because you will suffer. The question is whether that suffering has meaning, or whether you're suffering anyway in a life you hate because you were too afraid to try. Consistency means you show up every single day, whether you feel like it or not, whether you're inspired or not, whether anyone's watching or not. This is where most people fail. They're motivated for a week, a month, maybe even a year. But then life happens. They get tired. They get discouraged. They don't see immediate results, and they quit. But success without support is a war of attrition. It's not about intensity. It's about endurance. It's about outlasting everyone who doubts you, including the version of yourself that wants to give up. Here's a thought that should terrify and excite you in equal measure. The people who succeed without support become the people that others eventually want to support. There's a gravitational pull to independence. When you demonstrate that you don't need anyone, suddenly everyone wants to be part of what you're building. It's a paradox. The less you need them, the more they want you. Machiavelli observed this in politics. The prince who appears desperate for alliances is the one who gets the worst terms. The prince who seems completely self-sufficient is the one who gets courted. This is why needing support is so dangerous. It reeks of weakness. And humans, despite what they claim, are repelled by weakness. They're attracted to strength, to certainty, to people who move through the world like they own it. When you stop seeking support and start embodying self-sufficiency, you change the entire dynamic. You're no longer the one asking. You're the one being asked. You're no longer trying to prove your worth. Your work proves it for you. But there's a shadow side to this that we need to address. When you succeed without support, you create enemies. Not because you did anything wrong, but because your success is a reminder of their failure. You didn't need the things they said you needed. You didn't follow the rules they insisted were mandatory. You proved that another way was possible, and that makes you dangerous. Machiavelli warned about this. He said that there is nothing more difficult to execute, nor more dubious of success, nor more dangerous to administer than to introduce a new order of things, because you threaten the people who benefit from the old order. So what do? You accept it. You accept that you will be misunderstood. You accept that you will be criticized. You accept that people who couldn't do what you did will claim you got lucky, that you cheated, that you had advantages they didn't have. Let them. Their opinion doesn't change your reality. This is the final level of independence, emotional immunity to judgment. When you reach the point where other people's narratives about you have no power over your self-conception, you've won. Because they can say whatever they want and it doesn't touch you. Machiavelli died in 1527, largely forgotten by the world that exiled him. But his ideas didn't die, they spread. They influenced kings and conquerors, philosophers and presidents. He succeeded long after his death, because he didn't build his legacy on the approval of his contemporaries. He built it on truth, on observation, on ruthless honesty about how power actually works. And that's the model. That's what succeeding without support looks like in its purest form. You create something so undeniable that it outlives the petty judgments of the moment. So here's what I want you to understand as we close this. You don't need support. You never did. What you needed was the courage to face the world alone and the conviction to keep going when every rational voice said to stop. The people who built empires, who created movements, who changed the course of history, they didn't wait for permission. They didn't crowdsource their dreams. They looked at a world that told them no, and they said, "Watch me anyway." You think you need people on your side to win, but the truth is simpler and more terrifying than that. you are the only person you need, and the moment you truly believe that, everything changes.